Welcome to Satsang. Starting, as we always do, with one of the questions that's come in advance from our internet-based audience, or rather, they're not based on the internet, they're based somewhere, they're just joining us via the internet and connecting through this beautiful gift of technology from all over the world. So since they can't be here physically, we begin with a question from them, and then we'll open it up to any questions that anyone here has. We have 2 microphones, so whichever's closer to you, feel free to just come up to the mic and share your question. But starting as usual with one that's come in advance. How do I know whether I am genuinely growing spiritually, or it is just my ego playing a trick on me? How do I know if I'm genuinely growing spiritually, or it's just my ego playing a trick on me? So, it's a great question, because just because we've had a deep spiritual experience, just because we've had a powerful meditation, it doesn't mean we've suddenly become free of our ego. And what can end up happening, and it does actually quite a bit, sadly, is the ego comes in to the spiritual experiences and ends up kind of grabbing them and using them just as fodder for the ego itself. So let's say I've had this incredibly powerful spiritual experience, and it's made me realize that in the presence of the divine, I'm nothing. Nothing. Everything is God. Everything is God. Okay. So then I become really humble. And then you find yourself saying things like, I am the most humble person around. I'm so much more humble than this person is. You see the way the ego works. Or you have a spiritual experience, so you start meditating, and suddenly you feel like, oh, I'm so spiritual. Like I am the height of spirituality. And then you look down on people. What? You didn't meditate today? Really? You don't have a daily meditation practice? And we become like, the spiritual hierarchy. As though somehow, because you meditate, you're better. Because you've had a spiritual experience, you're better. And sadly, it ends up becoming just kind of the same game for the ego that used to say, I'm the prettiest, or I'm the most handsome, or I'm the smartest. Now it just says, oh, I'm the most spiritual. But it's the same ego, the same games of the ego, the same way we used to say, oh, he's so stupid. Now we say, oh, he's so unspiritual. Same games, same ego, just, like a different board game, but the same games. So the way to really know that you're growing spiritually is when you stop reciting sentences to yourself or to others that begin with, I am, fill in the blank, whatever it may be. So spiritual, so humble, great, doing this, doing that, whatever it may be. Any sentence that begins, I am. is going to be a sentence you want to avoid. And of course, we can't avoid it entirely. It's part of our human existence. But just notice, how many times do my sentences begin with I am? And similarly, how many sentences begin with they are? Like we're talking about somebody else. They are, fill in the blank. Anything negative, anything that sticks someone else in a box or with a label, that's separate from you, that's worse than you, that's being judged by you. These are ways to know that you have blessedly still a lot of opportunities to do work. That you're not going to run out of work to do anytime soon. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean you're a bad person or that you're not spiritual. It just means, okay, I've had some powerful spiritual experiences, and I'm still in the midst of this human ego drama thing. And that's okay. I mean, it's so much better to know it and work with it than not know it. So measure your spiritual progress by, what do your sentences sound like? The ones in your own mind? The way you think, the way you speak? And also notice how frequently. Another good, kind of signpost along the way is how frequently do things upset you? What does it take for you to get really upset, really angry, to lose yourself, to criticize people, call them names, yell at someone, put them down? What does it take? How much does it take? The less it takes, the more work you still blessedly have to be able to do. The less it takes, lots of work, the more it takes. So you notice maybe that a year ago, you used to get angry at the slightest little nothing things. And now maybe you only get angry maybe once a week. So you're growing. You're growing. You're evolving, you're changing, you're expanding, you're deepening. Maybe next year it'll be only once a month. And then slowly, slowly you'll get to a place where you can't even remember the last time you were really angry. Yeah, daily life happens with its frustrations and its, trials and tribulations, and there's more traffic than you thought, you're going to be late. But nothing really deeply rattles you. You no longer find yourself losing yourself and later saying things like, oh my God, I don't know who that was. That wasn't me. I didn't mean it. So these are some good signposts along the way, but it's a great question because you see people who are theoretically spiritual people, and what they're so clearly hung up on is their own drama and identity of being spiritual. And it's just a different drama. It's just a different identity. It's no more true than any other identity you might choose. I am the smart one. I am the spiritual one. Same problem. Just a different way of labeling yourself. Instead, allow yourself, if you've had a deep spiritual experience, if you're growing on a spiritual path, to just keep saying, it's just God's grace, it's God's grace, it's God's grace. I remember when I first met Pujya Swamiji, I have to be honest and admit, it actually drove me crazy. I couldn't believe it. Every time I would compliment him, or every time I would say, my God, you're so amazing, he would just say, it's all God's grace. It's all God's grace. Or I would say, oh, God, I can't believe that you did this or you did that. That's incredible. You're a hero. And he would just say, it's all God's grace. And in the beginning, it really drove me crazy. And I remember I used to say things like, yes, I know it's God's grace, but you. And I thought in the beginning, he was just saying it, which was also part of why it was so frustrating, because here I was trying to compliment him from just the depth of my heart, and I felt like he kept kind of pushing them away with just, it's God's grace, it's God's grace. And what I realized as time went by is that's actually his experience. He wasn't just saying that. It wasn't just some line that he had decided was going to be his way of responding to compliments. It actually is his felt sense experience. There's no sense inside of him of, I am so spiritual, or I have reached so high. I mean, we look at him and we know how high he's reached. That he's there, fully realized, fully awake, fully enlightened master. But his felt sense experience is just, it's all God. It's all God. There's no I in there to either accept the compliment or reject the compliment. Because there's no felt sense of I as separate from God. It's just, it's God's grace. It's God's grace. It's God's grace. It's like if you go and you stand in Ganga and you get wet. And somebody says to you, oh, wow, you are so wet. That's so great. You'd say it's just Ganga, right? I mean, Ganga made me wet. I didn't do anything. It's all of the wetness is Ganga. That's the experience. I'm in Ganga, so yes, of course, I'm wet. But it's not my wetness. It's Ganga's wetness. And that's what actually happens when you get to that spiritual height, is it's not my greatness. It's God's greatness. Like the wetness is Ganga's. So as you're walking the path, just allow yourself to keep remembering, it's just God's grace. It's just God's grace. You had a good meditation, it's God's grace. You had a spiritual experience, it's God's grace. You could help another human being or living being, it's God's grace. Somebody appreciates you, recognizes you, praises you, it's just God's grace. It's just God's grace. And allow that to become your experience. Again, it's not just a line to say. But ultimately, that's the experience to have, is it's not about me. It's just about God. If you put a sponge in Ganga and it got wet, you'd never say, oh, what a great sponge. It's all full of water. You'd realize it's just a sponge. The water is Ganga. Same way. We're vehicles, we're instruments for God's grace. However much we are able to contain, channel, share, manifest, it's all just God's grace. So let that start to become your reality. And you'll find that not only are you progressing even more on the spiritual path, but that there's no place for the ego to dig its nails in. It's just God's grace. It's just God's grace. There's nothing for the ego to grab onto there. And so it slips away. Great. Other questions? Any question anybody has here? Yes.
I have got shifted myself in Rishikesh.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I got shifted myself in Rishikesh.
Okay.
So I need to start a spiritual journey
Beautiful.
here in Rishikesh. So what are the steps or the schedule that I need to follow, or the one book that you would suggest that will guide me through my spiritual journey? Thank you.
Great. Welcome to Rishikesh. It's a beautiful blessing that you were able to shift here. I would focus your daily schedule around Ganga. Tragically, or just realistically, I think it's a little bit of a tragedy, but some just the nature of life, is even in a place like Rishikesh, especially Rishikesh today compared to Rishikesh 30 years ago, 50 years ago, is there's actually still a lot to distract you. If you have a tendency toward shopping, gossiping, wasting time, you can absolutely find plenty of ways to do that here. You can find plenty of people to do that with. There's plenty of ways to actually not be spiritual, even living in Rishikesh. It would be nice if somehow the moment that you just entered the city, all of your choices were made for you and we just had our minds focused only spiritually. But people are people and the human condition is the human condition. And so even here, if you are drawn to, attracted to people who are gossipers or partiers or time wasters or whatever, you'll be able to find plenty of them here. So if I were you, what I would do is I would focus my daily schedule on Ganga. Morning and evening, at least bare minimum. Get out to Ganga in the morning. Bare minimum, go and do pranam. Can you also have a snan? Can you also do some meditation on her banks? Begin your day like that. And then at the end of the day, like we end with the arati, just allow yourself at the end of the day to again come and be with her. Let that be like the bookmarks for your day. It'll change how you live the day, and it'll change how you sleep in the night. And of course, how you sleep impacts how you live the next day. How you live impacts how you sleep. So suddenly everything will get shifted. I then would also ask yourself, okay, I'm in the land of yoga, Yog Nagari. What can I do to make my every minute and every moment yoga? Doesn't just mean, okay, can I, join the yoga studio down the block, but can I actually allow myself to find a way to engage every minute, every moment in some type of karma yoga? Now, you may still have a job here, so that'll take up some time. Other things will take up time. But can you make every minute, every moment conscious, grounded, anchored? So you're mindful of your actions. Every action is in some way connected spiritually. And find some seva to do. There's so many seva projects that are going on. We're running a bunch. Other organizations are running. There's so much that's needed here. Find some way to help out. Even if it's just on your own, even if it's just with an empty bag and you spend an hour a day picking up trash from the banks of Ganga. Whatever it may be. Find some way to give back to this land, to give back to the people of this land, to give back to Ganga. And in terms of one book, there definitely is not just one book. I mean, there's so many. It depends on so much. But, you know, Pujya Swamiji always says really beautifully, he says, go on Facebook if you want, no problem. He said, but make sure to face your own book, meaning read your own book. Look at yourself, introspect. So I would say as far as on a spiritual level, Rishikesh is full of beautiful spiritual bookstores. There's so many beautiful saints who have actually lived here. Much of it in English. If you read Hindi, you've got an even wider selection of things to choose from. Choose whatever calls to your heart. But then also make sure that you're reading your own book. It's a beautiful first step to relocate the body. But you've got to also relocate the mind. Shift your mind into a more spiritual way of thinking. And so ask yourself every minute, every moment, everything you're doing, is this in alignment with why I moved to Rishikesh? Is this in alignment with the spiritual life I'm looking for? And slowly, slowly, you'll build your day. And you're welcome, of course, to join us here every day. We have a beautiful morning fire ceremony. Join us in the morning for that. Join us in the evening for Arti and Satsang. If you are not working in the day, join us for the yoga, meditation. There's so much. And slowly, slowly, your own schedule will build. But allow it to be in alignment with why you came and the energy and the power of this place. Ask yourself, whatever you're doing, is this leading to a greater purity of mind, a greater purity of heart? Is this action an act of surrender? And if not, that's okay, but then just change it so that all of your acts become that. And you'll find that you're growing more and more deeply. Beautiful, and welcome. Other questions? Yes.
Namaste, Sadhviji.
Namaste.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity again. And I would
Yes. That's right. The man with 4 questions. We got through one. Let's do one more tonight.
Sure. So, by the grace of Mother Ganga, I got the answer of another question.
I love when that happens.
Yes. It's like the whole environment here is answering my doubts.
Yes.
I'll present the last 2 questions, and I want you to choose and answer one.
Okay.
So the first is, why did God create the world? And the second is, how can I find the purpose of my life?
Okay. So let's start with the second one. The first one is also fun, but it's a little bit more philosophical. The second one is a little bit more personal and practical. So I have to say, and this has become a really common question. These days, there's a bit of an epidemic of people feeling like they don't know what their purpose is. And I think a lot of it is due to a lot of marketing, actually, that's coming in from the West, but now it's in India as well, around people who want to sell you something to help you find your purpose. And if I'm going to sell you something, then it must be very complex. It must be something that you cannot discover or figure out on your own, which is why you need to pay me to teach you how to do it. And the reason that I think about it like this is a brand new illness. Go home and ask your parents whether when they were young they struggled with wondering their purpose. If your grandparents are still alive, ask your grandparents, did they struggle with wondering their purpose? I'd say in at least 70 to 80% of the cases, the answer is no. Maybe 70 to 80% your parents, and in your grandparents, I would say if 1 out of 100 actually struggled with it, it would still surprise me. This is a recent phenomenon. Now you ask people, everybody is struggling. I think a couple of things have happened. First of all, it's the issue, as I said, of kind of the era in which everyone has a class, a course, a CD, a book, something to sell you, to teach you. And if I need you to pay me to do it, I have to convince you that there is a problem. So we've convinced people that we don't know our purpose, we can't know our purpose, it's very difficult to know your purpose. And if you don't know your purpose, your life is useless. Because if you don't know it, you'll never find it. The other issue, though, that has led to the problem is actually a beautiful blessing, which is that if you look at the career choices that people have today, the number of options that you and your generation have to choose from, it's really almost infinite. I mean, we could sit here all night making a list of the different types of jobs you could have, and we wouldn't even get to all of them. You go back to your parents' generation, and especially your grandparents' generation, there weren't that many different options. Doctors, nurses, teachers, pilots, business person, lawyer, an engineer, an artisan of some sorts. I'm sure we could think of some more, but let's say even that was 8 that I just listed. Let's say 15, even 20 maybe. Different main jobs, waiter, waitress, cook, okay. Now, it's infinite. Everybody's inventing their own career. And that's wonderful. I mean, it's beautiful, it's fantastic that we're now in a world where you really, if you can envision it, you can turn it into a career. The dilemma is, I think that it's brought your generation into this place of thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what to do. I mean, if you've only got to decide between being a doctor, or a policeman, or a fireman, or a pilot, or a cook, or a teacher, or a lawyer, it's a lot easier to figure out kind of where your individual skills and abilities and characteristics lie. Now, there's no end. The other issue is that a lot of the jobs now have become much more things that are people's entire lives. Entrepreneurs, for example, they're not working 9 to 5. right? It's their whole life. They're thinking, they're creating, they're inventing, they're building, they're manifesting, they're all of these things, and it's wonderful. But when you had a job 30, 50, 70 years ago, that was just a job. You went in the morning, you came in the evening, hopefully it was something that fulfilled you and, benefited others. But then people found purpose in other ways also. With families, with their communities, they'd volunteer once a week, they'd go to church or temple or whatever it was. And they had kind of meaning that came from my family relationships, meaning that came from my work, meaning that came from my religion. And there it was a good life. But now we've got this bar that has just skyrocketed of like, if you, every minute of every day, do not feel like you are living to your absolute highest creative potential, you're somehow failing yourself. And I think that it's a really great disservice that we're doing, because the only thing that we need to be living to the highest every minute and every moment is truth and love. Even a tree does not produce 365 days a year. There is nothing in nature that is on like that. Apple trees have off seasons. Everything in nature has seasons. But we are somehow expected to be at this heightened state every minute, every moment. Full on passion, full on purpose, full on creation, manifestation, achievement. It's not only impossible, it's inhuman. It's unnatural. And I think it's really detrimental. What we need to live every minute, every moment is our highest truth and our highest love. And it may be in the form of sitting down and having a cup of tea with someone who needs a good listener for an hour or two. And it may be walking through nature with your bare feet. And it may be making sandwiches that you're going to go out and give to the poor. And it may be entering data in whatever your job is that you do from 9 to 5 so that you can have extra time to do your different hobbies. There's nothing that you cannot do while living in your highest truth with love, as long as it's ethical, as long as it's nonviolent. You'd have a hard time working for the tobacco industry, or we had someone recently was asking about his family that were pig farmers, and should he do pig farming with his family? And I told him I thought that would be really difficult to do while anchored in love and compassion. But most things, most jobs, even those that seem the most mundane, you're sweeping, you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're a waiter or a waitress, you're entering data, you're designing something, you're stuffing envelopes, whatever it might be. There's no reason that you cannot do that in the highest love and the highest truth. Let that be your North Star. Because here's what's going to happen. When you're living in the highest truth and love, your heart is open. Your mind is open. And you are open to the voice of, the calling of, the signal of your own intuition, which is God speaking through you, the universe speaking through you. And so as and when there are things you need to be doing, changes you need to make, turns you need to take, you'll take them. But the meaning is not going to come from just finding the right career. This is the biggest myth, and again, I think the biggest detriment that we're doing to people these days, is leading our youth into thinking that if you just find the right career, it's going to bring all of the meaning to your life. Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because that which brings meaning is not always that which puts food on the table. The definition of a meaningful life is not always that which puts money in your bank, which means you're going to have to do something to get money. If what brings you the most meaning, the highest purpose, is creation of art, creation of music, gardening, bringing life to whatever it might be, well, chances are, unless you are one of the very, very, very tiny minority who actually get paid for their art or their music, you're going to also have to do something to put food on the table. And that's okay. Your career does not have to be your highest purpose. It can be, and some people find that, and that's beautiful. But don't hold yourself up to that standard that if it's not lucrative, it can't be my meaning in life. You may find a way to make money so that you can do that which is your purpose the rest of the time. Lots of people do it like that. Main thing is, stay focused in love and truth of you. Stay focused in that. And when you do, then you will be open. You'll be open to calls, you'll be open to signs, and you'll be open to opportunities every minute and every moment to share with people. Because actually the highest purpose comes and greatest meaning comes when we share. We share what we can do. We share it with one person, we share it with 10 people, we share it online, we share it in some way. And so you'll find these opportunities to share. And again, it may be a kind word. It may be something artistic, maybe something impactful in some way. Something in writing, could be anything. But you'll find it. And again, realize it may not even necessarily only be one thing. It could be 10 different things. But don't let yourself get caught up in this idea that somehow there is one thing and you move through the world with like a fishing pole looking to hook on to that one thing that's going to be your meaning, your purpose. Find it in every moment, every minute, through connecting with that truth of who you are, which is divinity and love, and then sharing that. Beautiful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. A beautiful morning and day to our family joining us online. And so